Next, we're going to scissors. Two different kinds of scissors here. I first started out with these, and these are just a 7-inch what they're considered a butterfly scissor. They're great. They just have, you know, decent sized blade, and they're very ergonomical. They're very comfortable in your hand. You can put 2 in here, 2 out here. Fits the thumb decently, and it's just a matter of cutting. These are good for silhouette and outside trimming of fine branchery and traceries of twigs. I have this set here, and this set has, if you notice, a little bit longer handle on them, just about the same size as far as the heads go. What this one's for is getting back up in the tree, a little bit farther deeper into maybe the branch structure to prune or trim interior, where this one's better for exterior. Initially, I would say these may be best to purchase initially, because you can use these on the interior of the branches as well as out the exterior of branches. If I only had to buy one set of scissors, I'd probably buy these, but I went ahead and got both of them just because I ended up having these first because these were not available, and then these became available, so I purchased them. So that's the two that I use. There are a lot more pruning shears and scissors and what have you, but these are the two main ones that I utilize now. I may get into the finer scissors, the longer, skinnier bladed scissors and whatnot later on, after the ramification of my trees has developed, but I'm not quite there yet, so that's what I have for now. Next up is a trunk and or branch splitter. These are always going to be a very large size, and if you look at them, that's what they look like, and they're made for putting in between a branch and splitting it in half. I was working on a Japanese black pine with Hiroshi Yamaji. And it was pre-bonsai material, and we were doing the initial styling with the tree, and the apex was going this way, making the tree look very off balanced, and I wanted to move the apex back this way to kind of give a better balance and composition to the tree. Although it was about that big around, maybe that big around, in circular, not oval but circular, and he saw that I had branch splitters, so he said split the branch, wrap it in raffia, then wrap it in wire, and by doing that it makes it not as strong to bend, or it makes it more easy to bend, and when he bent it, he bent and twisted it at the same time. We were able to move the apex where it needed to be. So branch splitters, not really 100% necessary, maybe more towards the advanced side, I would say, as far as the tools that are necessary. I've used it that one time, and I've never used it since. So I have it in case I need it, and I'm a firm believer of having something and not needing it versus needing it and not having it. So branch splitter. Next up is a sieve, I guess you could call it. It comes with 3 different sizes. As you can see, it has a large screen size, an intermediate screen size, and a fine screen size. I use the large screen size when I'm sifting my Nature's Helper, or the pine bark, and if you want just the intermediate size pine bark, you use this one for the large, and you use this one for the intermediate one to get rid of the fines, and you keep what's left. I typically need the fines in the very small stuff, so I just use the large size. The small one I use when I sift akadama and kanuma, and in lava I'll use the fine one because it'll sift the dust out of the lava and it keeps the rock inside the sieve. So that's the basics on using a sieve. Next up, root tools. I have the root rake, a 3-prong root rake. I have chopsticks. Never underestimate a decent pair of chopsticks. Chopsticks are very good for fine roots and scraping the surface and trying to line roots up instead of having a whole tangled mess. I use just about exclusively for nursery material or getting field soil off of trees. And This I had made myself. It was a ash hammer handle that got broken, and I stuck it on a sanding belt and sanded it down to what you see here. If you notice, it is slightly curved, almost like a bird's beak, and the reason I've done that is so when I hold it like this and I stab into the soil and I rake outward, it's not a straight up and down movement, it's more of a curving movement, so I can get a lot of soil out and line up a lot of roots really fast with this, and they don't really get entangled on this and tear like they can typically do with this. What will happen a lot of times is the roots will get intertwined in this, and then when you go to pull it out, it'll tear the roots. So I don't really use this much anymore. I do use it quite a bit for initially breaking up a soil ball, but once I get the outer layer of the soil ball broke up, I always go to this tool right here. Can't buy these. I made this myself. It's very simple to do. You see what it is. It's just a handle of a hammer that I've sanded down to a point. Next up, we're going to skip down to here. This is a brush. You know, all I did was cut off the handle so it fits nicely into my hand. Easy to work with. I think these are like 99 cents at any paint store. I don't necessarily use a bamboo bristled brush. This seems to do the job for me really well. It'll knock moss off of trunks. If I need something finer than that, I will go to a brush similar to this. This is actually the brush I use for that. It's got brass bristles on the inside and then nylons on the outside. I think I picked this up at the dollar store for 99 cents. It's used as scrubbing dish pans. It's really good at getting rid of moss, but you got to be careful with this because these brass bristles can also take bark off. So that's what I use. Next up, grafting knife. I was at the right place at the right time, was able to pick up a real hardened steel Japanese grafting knife. Haven't done a whole lot of approach grafting or any kind of grafting with this thing, but what I do use this for is when I make my large cuts on my maples and my deciduous trees when the callousing starts. The next season I'll take this and go around the edge because it's extremely sharp. I'll go around the edge of the callus and re-wound it, and that helps to the continuation of the callus closing over the wound. If you can't find one of these, or one of these is not in your budget, that's fine, because there's another tool out there that works perfectly fine for that. X-Acto knife. This is what I used before I bought the grafting knife. So an X-Acto knife will kind of do the same thing. This feels a lot more stable in your hand than what an X-Acto knife is. But either way, either one works. Next up are branch benders. What these are is I got a large size and a small size, and what you do with these is you have a branch that's too large to bend with wire. So what you do, bear with me here, is you put the branch in question in this. It'll look like that, and then when you crank down on this, what basically it does is it takes that branch and it'll bend it. And so you can bend very large caliber branches with either of these tools. And what you want to initially do is you'll bend it to a point and let it set, come back another week later, a couple more twists, let it set, a couple weeks later, a couple more twists, let it set. That's the way I use it if I don't have raffia. If I have raffia, I'll wrap it real tight with the raffia, and then I'll use that and I'll kind of bend it where I want it to be and then let it go. And I'll leave it, you can leave these on. This is brass. These are aluminum, and I think these are stainless steel, so they will not rust very much at all. The only thing that seems to rust is the nut right here. These nuts are not stainless. So that's the only thing that really rusts on them, but just a little shot of WD-40 and no problems. Next up, saws. I have 3 different size saws here. This is a Silky Gomataro. It's a 240 millimeter saw, and this is a Silky Gumboy. The only difference between these two is the Silky Gumboy is a folder, where the Gomataro is not. Both of these have replaceable blades. This is where you replace the blade on this one. This right here is where you replace the blade on this one, and they're actually the same blade. You can utilize the same blade for both of them, so you don't have to buy 2 separate blades. If you look at these, Essentially, it's the same blade. They're both the exact same blade. So, one's just a stationary, one's a folder. I take the folder with me. Actually, I bought the folder first because this is the first one I've seen. So I went ahead and bought that one, and then I found this one, so I went ahead and got it as well. This is good for use, just around the studio or whatever is what I mainly use this one for, large branch removal. I take this one with me on my yamadori collecting because I can not only cut roots with it, but I can cut branches and trunk height as well. This is the very first saw I ever bought. This is a kaiku. It's a very small one. It's utilized for very small branches. As you can see, it's got very fine teeth on it. I don't hardly ever use this saw anymore. It was the first one I bought when I was working on smaller trees, so it's great for smaller trees, show hen size trees. This is perfect. You wouldn't be wanting to put anything like this on a show hen size tree, obviously. And this would be utilized, let's say, if you have this size concave cutter, but you have a branch that you really should be using this size to remove. Well, you whip out your small folding saw, and you can remove that branch without issue. So those are the three saws that I utilize. Next up, we're going to talk about cut paste. I have, as you can see, 4 different kinds of cut paste here. This is called Kional. This is like a very thick, it starts out green, and it's like a very thick glue consistency. When it dries hard, and it is 100% waterproof, no penetration whatsoever of water. So on trees that have trunks that are very fibrous, that would be easy to rot, I use this a lot, and that helps prevent them from rotting. Next up, this is also made by the same company. I'm not 100% sure what the translation on this stuff is, but this is very similar to this, only this comes out like an Elmer's glue consistency. It's kind of like a glue with some clay mixed in together. It comes out very runny. You stick it on there. When it dries, it almost dries like a latex. So it's very pliable, and it does come off. You can remove this very easily, where once you put this stuff on, the tree's going to have to push callus underneath it to get it off. Once it's on, it's not coming off. These are made by the same company as well, and what these are, they call them cut paste. And this is the brown, this is the gray. They're both identical. What these are is these are kind of like a clay or a putty based. They do dry, and when they dry hard, but as you can see, it's kind of like a clay based cut paste. And you take this out, roll it up in a ball, and then use your thumb and work it around the wound. A lot of people like to use this if you're just going to go around a wound, around the perimeter to encourage callusing. A lot of people will use this. I always use this or this when I make my initial cuts, depending on the kind of wood I'm dealing with. And then after that stuff's on there, when the callus starts growing, it'll roll it. Both of these, it'll actually get up underneath it and roll it off, and eventually it'll come off completely once the callus is completely healed over. But if I've got a large wound and I've used either this or this and it's calloused to a point, what I'll do is I'll re-wound that area, and then I'll come back with this. I'll roll it up so it's a long, like snake-like, real long tubular, I guess, not even tubular, but it'd be a solid round. And then I'll go around the perimeter with that and just press it down, and then the callus will grow underneath that and work itself out, and I can continue that process of healing the wound. So those are the cut pastes that I utilize.